You're listening to theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of a very special 2-part podcast here at the Outdoor Station. 100 miles south of the French coast and 50 miles west of the Italian coast lies a rocky massif in the Mediterranean Sea, known as Corsica. Although its highest peaks only reach 8,858 feet, they hold snow for much of the year, and despite the Mediterranean location and the beautiful sandy beaches, the mountains are renowned for sudden and violent changes of weather. It is home to one of the finest and toughest high-level, long-distance Grande Randonnée walks, totalling 118 miles in length, and affectionately known by walkers around the world as the GR20. There are numerous books written about it. Probably the most well-known is published by Cicerone Press and written by Paddy Dillon. However, books are one thing, and a passionate storyteller is entirely another. Shirley Worrall is well known on various forums as P. Wiglet, and she undertook the GR20 in the summer of 2008. And with the walk being at the top of most UK and European hikers' to-do list, she's very kindly taken time to chat with me about her experience and all it entailed. Continuing on from part 1, where we discussed some of the costs involved in doing this walk, did she think it represented good value for money?
Well, I mean, in a way, it was good value for money because it was an absolutely fabulous experience. I mean, it was a fantastic experience. And, I mean, you might be a bit like me in that certainly, I suppose, I tend to come back from walks where I've had a great time and think, oh my God, it's the best walk I've ever had. It was absolutely fantastic. And, you know, I mean, I've had that feeling before. But really, Corsica was truly wonderful. I mean, everything about it was absolutely wonderful. And so really, when I consider that I went away for 2.5 weeks and had that sort of experience that I'll never forget, and it cost me less than £1,000, then I'd have to say that, yes, it was good value for money. But it's more expensive than walking in the Pyrenees. It's more expensive than walking in the Pyrenees. Having said that, I'm not sure that it's more expensive than walking in England, because of course, if you want to go off and do the coast to coast, as I've done several times, and stay in B&Bs, then that gets very expensive quickly, and you don't have the advantages of the weather.
Yeah, yes, that's a good point, actually. Very fair point. Okay, so back to the walk then itself. You've obviously described very eloquently how the days differ as regards distances and so on. I suppose two things that immediately come to mind. First of all, was there a temptation at any time to actually merge two of the days together if they're only sort of 6 or 7 kilometres? And the second thing, what was the highest point that you went over?
Well, in relation to the merging of days, I think that before I went, and when I looked at at how short some of the days were, it did seem to me that it might be a good idea to merge them. But pretty soon when I got there, I decided that I didn't want to do it. First of all, because as I said earlier, the terrain was pretty challenging. And so although a few of the early days are very short, I did feel that I'd actually had a proper walk, even though I hadn't covered a great amount of ground. Secondly, because of course one of the nice things about doing a walk like this, and particularly if, as I was, you're walking on your own, it's nice to see familiar faces. And of course, if you start nipping ahead, then you don't get the advantage of that because, you know, the people you've chatted with outside the refuge the night before are going to be left behind. And thirdly, you know, I did want to relax. I didn't want to do it any more quickly than I had to do it. And so for all of those reasons, despite what I'd thought before I left, I pretty soon decided when I got there that I didn't want to be going any faster than I needed to go. Having said that, when I realized that I'd made a cock-up with my calculation of how many days were required to do the route, I did at that stage realize that I was going to either have to merge 2 days together at some point or alter my route to miss a bit out. And I definitely didn't want to do that. I was very keen not to miss a bit out. I mean, I'd gone all the way to Corsica and I didn't want to have to not do the last day into Conca or take one of the lower level alternatives that are sometimes available in order to make up some time. And so I did actually walk 2 days together. It was the day immediately after Visavona. Give me half a moment and the day from Visavona, I walked directly from Visavona to Boca de Verde, which was a walk of 24 kilometres in the end, but most people would walk that day in 2 stages. And it was fairly tiring, but it was certainly feasible. It was feasible to put those 2 days together. So that was the position in relation to the merging of things. I think the other thing you asked me about was the highest point. Well, the highest point of the walk is a place called Breche du Capitelu. I mean, again, I don't know how it's properly pronounced, but it's 2,225 meters. One of my habits when I'm walking is, although I do look at the guidebook in advance, and on this occasion, indeed, I had it with me, I don't tend to read it in an enormous amount of detail. I tend to prefer to just let the thing unfold. So I didn't actually realize until afterwards that I had been to the highest point on the route, because I hadn't been organized enough to be anticipating it in advance. But it was a very beautiful place. And I noticed that everybody seemed to stop there, and so I stopped as well. And, there were a few of the familiar faces there when I arrived, and some more of them arrived as I was sitting around. And we probably all sat around for about an hour, basically just enjoying the weather. And there were some very large birds that were flying about and trying to get pieces of people's sandwiches, and just basically watching those and watching the lakes. There were a couple of beautiful lakes glistening in the sun some distance down the mountainside, and so I sat around there and watched those for a while, and then eventually we all pressed on.
Well, you're certainly selling it to me. It sounds like I'm feeling very relaxed just listening to you.
It is quite fantastic. I mean, it's truly wonderful. And I really do hope to go back and do it again. I really do hope to go and do it again with my stove next time, but I definitely want to go back. But it's a truly fantastic thing. And honestly, Bob, I'm sorry now that I waited so long before I went to do it. Because as I say, in the end, it turned out that I could lessen the risk of lightning strike by going early in July. And the scrambling, which we haven't really spoken about yet, turned out to be, with one exception, much less terrifying than I had anticipated. So I'm sorry that I didn't go sooner. But I mean, again, as I said earlier on, it is a challenging route. It really is a challenging walk, I think, far more challenging than the stuff that I've done before. And so I think it's right to think pretty carefully about going to do it and make a sort of proper inventory of whether you're equipped to do it before just setting off.
Looking at the books again and the odd little reference books I've got here, they seem to suggest also, if you've got time, to actually take some diversions and pick off a few peaks, as it were, sort of
yes.
Monroe style.
Yes.
Were you tempted to do that at all, or did you see anybody do that?
Well, I was tempted to do it. I didn't see people doing it, but then again, that may simply be because the people that I mainly spoke to were the people who sort of set off to just do the thing over a period of 15 days. I was tempted to do it. The reason I didn't do it was because, I mean, again, I kind of mentioned that I'd somehow managed to miscalculate the number of days that would be required for me to do the route. I think perhaps what I'd been thinking is, it's 14 or 15 days to do the whole thing, but some of the days are very short, and so therefore I'll probably run 2 or 3 of them together, and then I'll nip up this or I'll sort of nip up that. That's kind of probably, with the benefit of hindsight, it's probably what I'd been thinking before I went. But as I explained a short time ago, when I got there, I realized that that's not how it was going to work. And so I found that, in fact, I didn't have time to go off and do those additional peaks. What I did speak to, there's several people I spoke to had, in fact, gone to visit. Now, there's a place, the name of which I've forgotten, that many people go to visit from Visavona. I think it might be the oldest village in Corsica, so it wasn't a peak, but it's a sort of place of historical interest. And quite a lot of people that I spoke to had actually broken the journey there and spent a day going off to do that, and then they'd continued. But the thing is, of course, as I suppose we've all noticed when we've booked flights to go to places like this or to go out to the Pyrenees, it's often no more expensive to pay for a flight that enables you to come back after 17, 18 or 19 days than it would be to pay for a flight that brings you back after 14 days. And so next time I go, I will do the calculation properly, and I am going to allow a few extra days so that I can perhaps go and see that historical village and perhaps try to go up a couple of the peaks. And as I say, I mean, by the time we've actually got over there, it doesn't really cost very much more to spend a few extra days and do those things that turn it into a really very special holiday.
Well, it's true all the time, isn't it? In the UK, sadly, it costs you virtually half the holiday to get out the country, let alone do what you're trying to do.
Yep.
Now, talking about Visavona, the book that I'm reading, and certainly I've also heard from Chris Townsend's and Cameron McNeish's review of the trip, is famous for being a pig area, a pig territory, which I understand is obviously a subject close to your heart.
Well, of course.
Did you? Because I mean, Chris lost his shoes, I think, to pigs rifling through his tent or whatever. Did you have any experience of that, or see anybody have any experience of wild pigs?
Well, I didn't see. I did see a couple of wild pigs. I didn't see as many as I'd have liked to see because, of course, I am kind of fond of pigs and piglets. And I did see a couple in the mountains on a couple of days. And in fact, I think it might have been at Bergerie de Londa that Chris is alleged to have had his sandals stolen by a pig in the middle of the night. And yes, there are quite a lot of pigs wandering around there, but there were no sort of problem. I mean, they weren't in any way aggressive, and there weren't any sort of, they weren't sort of ravaging hordes of pigs dashing through the villages and carrying the tourists away. There's nothing like that. They all look very friendly, in fact. No,
I was thinking you weren't actually carrying very much food, though, for them to rifle through, I presume.
Oh, sorry. Well, no, I suppose that I wasn't. I did have bits and pieces of food, of course, but no, I didn't. And I was aware, I had it in my mind all the time. I'd read Chris's story, his account of having his sandals stolen in the middle of the night. And it was in my mind, in particular, it was in my mind when I stayed at the refuge where it happened. But no, I didn't have that problem. I'm not sure how it I think that at the refuge where Chris's sandal was stolen, I mean, there's a fence there now, and it may be that it wasn't in place when Chris and Cameron did it, or if it was, it may be that the pigs burrowed underneath or something. But no, I didn't encounter anybody who had any difficulty or problem with pigs or any other creatures stealing their kit.
SAS pigs, obviously. From Visavona, you've obviously replenished yourself. You've had a nice hotel's rest, and I'm sure pampered and rested and topped up with things. You're bound to be in the stride by now. Did you find mentally it became it was definitely a north section and a south section, but your approach to it was much more comfortable, and all the fear and all the little things that were worrying you had disappeared, and you topped up presumably with snacks and things there as well before you set off?
Yes, it's probably fair to say that. I mean, I wasn't quite as relaxed as I might otherwise have been on leaving Visavona, because that was the day when I actually walked 2 stages, and so of course I had to press on fairly quickly in order to get both of the stages out of the way. But I knew that I was embarking upon the part of the walk that was less vertiginous, and since I'm not particularly comfortable with heights, I felt happy about that. Excuse me, please. And I'd become used to the climate. And I read before I left that, there were black widow spiders, and I knew, of course, that there would be scorpions in Corsica. And although I love wee creatures, I don't relish the idea of sharing a sleeping bag with them, and I had worried a little bit about whether my sleeping bag might fill up with black widow spiders and scorpions during the night. But I'd learnt by the time I got to Visavona that wasn't going to happen, and so yes, in little ways like that also I was able to relax and just settle into it. And yes, I mean, the second part of it I felt less demanding physically than the first part, but it was still pretty demanding. It's just a slightly different sort of terrain, really, not perhaps as rocky and not quite as sharp, and the ups were not quite as steep, and the downs not perhaps quite as steep as those that I'd encountered in the first half.
The scrambling you were talking about, then, where is there a particular area where it's all condensed together, or is the scrambling dotted throughout the whole walk?
Well, the scrambling, there may have been bits of scrambles in the second part. If there are, I don't remember them, although, I could remind myself, I suppose, by looking through the guidebook. But basically, the scrambling comes mainly in the first part. On a day-to-day basis, there will be little bits where you need to, go down a little tiny scramble, a steep, slabby bit of rock maybe, nothing terribly demanding. And if it's thought that there might be any sort of difficulty, then frequently there will be a chain there to help. But there is one, as it were, sort of... the place that's famous for a scramble on the GR20 is the Cirque de la Solitude, which comes on, I'm just trying to work it out, I think it's on day 5. And this is a huge bowl, essentially. Yes, it is. Was it day 4? No, it was day 4. It's a huge bowl that you come to about 3 hours out of Hort Asco, and you have to sort of climb down into it, and then you climb back up out of it on the other side, and that has a fairly fearsome reputation. And as a person who is nervous of heights, I felt that it deserved its reputation. It's definitely a place where it's necessary to be careful, and if you don't take your time, then unless you have no fear of heights, it's a place where it's possible to feel a little overwhelmed. But having said that, it's very well equipped with chains and ropes. Unless it's wet underneath, unless the rock is wet, then it's nice and grippy. And I think if you take things a step at a time, then there's no reason why it should be a problem, as long as you're careful. I mean, I realize I've sort of inserted about 1,000 caveats into that, but I do feel that, I mean, it's necessary to recognize that the Cirque de la Solitude can be a dangerous place. And so, yes, you do need to be careful, and you do need to give some serious thought to whether it's the sort of place you want to be before you start descending into it. As it happens, when I started into it, I hadn't even reached the first set of chains when a group of 3 people came up behind me, and it turned out that they were Corsicans, in fact. They were Corsican people who were very experienced walkers, and one of them, a chap called Freddie, has sometimes worked as a guide, and he must have noticed, even though I was trying to appear confident, he must have noticed, I think, even from behind, that I had kind of the look of a nervous walker about me, and he just sort of stepped past and basically guided me down at the same time as he was guiding his friends down, which was great. And in fact, we all became friends, and over the course of the next few days, we walked together, and when I finished the walk, they invited me very kindly to stay with them in Bastia, which was incredibly kind, and I did stay there in Bastia. That was pretty brilliant. And so therefore I had the benefit of Freddie, you see, to help me through the Cirque de la Solitude. But when I was sitting in the refuge that night after the experience was over, sipping on my pastis, because I'd moved on from beer to pastis by that stage, and I asked the other people what they'd thought of it, and nobody else, seemed to have had any particular difficulties with it. I'm not aware of anybody who started the walk on the same day that I started it, who got to the Cirque and couldn't go on.
During that period of those 2 weeks then, as much as you've mentioned the caveats about your confidence and abilities and so on, were you aware of anybody having any accidents or any issues?
I wasn't aware of any accidents, but I did come across an English bloke, actually, I think it must have been the end of, perhaps, it was either the second or the third day. I met an English bloke at one of the refuges who told me that he was finding it more frightening, basically, than he'd expected it to be. He'd gone up, he got a little bit lost that day. He'd gone up some rocky promontory accidentally and thought he was going to fall to his death. And I mean, clearly he hadn't, unless I was chatting with his ghost. But he decided that he wasn't going to go any further, and I didn't see him after that. And in fact, on the first night, on my first night when I was camping at Calanzana, there's a group of, I think it was 4 young English blokes camping in the next tent. And I saw them off and on over the course of the next couple of days, but then after that I didn't ever see them again, and I don't know what happened to them. I'm sure that they finished it safely, but I did wonder whether perhaps they'd found that it wasn't what they were anticipating and had gone off to do something else. So no, I'm not aware of any accidents, but I certainly came across one person, and possibly more than one person, who decided it was too demanding, and so they went off elsewhere. I mean, actually, having said that, I did come across a person who'd had a bit of an injury. There was a young Englishman again. He was at the refuge in Calanzana when I first arrived there, and he'd twisted his ankle very badly, so he'd had to leave his friends some days earlier and make his way down, and he was waiting in Calanzana for them to come. But, I mean, one of the nice things about the GR20 and Corsica being a relatively small place is that, you see, if you do have that kind of experience, if you do embark upon the walk and find that it's you're not enjoying it, or you are enjoying it, but you don't feel that you can continue with it, then it is possible to simply come off the route and go and do something else. It's not terribly difficult to do that. Certainly Paddy's book, and possibly David's as well, incorporates, as it were, escape routes. that are described in relation to, I think, probably every stage. It'll say, it's not so much directed at people, who've changed their mind. It's more that they're included, I think, for in case the weather is dreadful, and so therefore it's not safe to be on the higher parts. But basically, there'll normally be something there to tell you how to get down to a lower point. And if you do walk down to a village, then I'm sure that it'll be possible to get a taxi, and you can go to one of the towns and spend your time doing something else.
The fact that you just took a guidebook rather than a map, was the actual route sort of fairly well signposted? Was it easy to stay to that?
Well, it was very easy. I immediately add that, of course, I did it in July, so the weather was perfect and visibility was clear. But, in common with, that there's this series of the GR routes, the Grand Randonnée routes, and it's the same in the Pyrenees. They have these markings on rocks. There's a sort of white stripe on top of a red stripe, and this tells you where the route goes, and they're marked on boulders and sometimes on the ground and on trees, and on the GR20, it's very, very liberally sort of equipped with these markings, and at no stage did I have any difficulty at all knowing where I was supposed to go. I didn't take a map, and I felt kind of bad that I hadn't taken a map, because I've never gone anywhere before without a map, even though, I don't consider myself to be very good at maps. I'm not a natural map reader, although I do try. But I hadn't actually been able to get hold of I think there are 2 1 to 50k maps available, and I just hadn't been able to get hold of them in the time that was available to me. And so since everything I'd read had suggested to me that I probably wouldn't need one, I just took a compass so that at least I could know which direction I was walking in if mist came down. And I set off with the guidebook and knowing that the markings were there. But the markings were so frequent and clear that I didn't have any difficulty at any stage, which is unprecedented for me.
The trip itself, as you came to the end then, like a lot of walks, sometimes you have this big winding down and this sinking feeling that sort of takes place as you start to sort of see the end in sight, as it were. I'm sure you saw the coast and the views and so on. Did you feel, sort of slightly disappointed it was coming to an end, or did you sort of feel elated that you'd got there safe and well?
Oh, well, it was the usual mixture of those two feelings. I was certainly elated because it was an achievement. I felt it was an achievement. It was very physically demanding, and it was something that I'd wanted to do but been a little apprehensive about trying for several years. And so as I was approaching Conqueror, I realized that I'd almost finished. And so, of course, I did feel an immense, I felt I was elated. I was delighted to have done it. At the same time, I was very much looking forward to being able to put up my feet and go and sip at some more pastis and perhaps find myself a hotel. And that was good. But there's always the feeling of, being sad that soon it'll be time to go home and get back to the drizzle and the sort of, the mundane toil of every life and so on and so forth over here. So I always have mixed feelings at the end of any walk. But certainly, it did feel like an achievement, and there was, basically I felt very happy to have finished.
And it's not a disappointing end, I presume. You could get to Conquer and celebrate.
No, I didn't find it disappointing at all. I wandered down into Conquer. The refuge that I stayed at the night before, the refuge di Paleri, I think it's called, was really the most beautiful of very many beautiful places that refuges that I'd camped outside over the period of the preceding 2 weeks. It was absolutely staggeringly beautiful. Although I had an early night that night, but the other people who were staying there, I think, all sort of got round a table and shared some beers and probably not pasta, sandwiches perhaps, but they all had a really good time, and there was, I think, pretty much a sort of festival atmosphere because it was the last night. And as I say, I had an early night, and so I slept through that. I hadn't realised it was taking place. But the following day, I made my way down, and there was the usual steep descent. But when I found that I suddenly emerged from a wood onto a road and realised that I was in Conquer much more quickly than I'd expected it to happen. And then I was quite looking forward to finding my way down to, the bar where I could sit down and put down the rucksack and have a drink. And I sat down and I got a drink and I tried to chat with the local bloke and, the barman. And he told me how to find my way to a hotel. And I really enjoyed just sitting in the sunshine and soaking up the knowledge that I didn't have to carry a heavy rucksack anywhere in particular, once I'd found the hotel. And it was a really nice afternoon. but people eventually arrived. I think I was the first there, actually, at about 11 o'clock in the morning. It was a very early finish for me, and I'd kind of motored down as quickly as I could, so I was first in, and then other people came in, and then, over the course of the next few hours, a big bunch of people gathered around, and we sat together and had a bit of a chat and a drink and so on. And then most of the other people got on a bus and went off somewhere else, but I decided to stay in Conker, and an Italian man that I'd met at a refuge perhaps a week earlier, he was also staying in Conker, and so we spent a couple of hours together chatting over a beer and a pastis at the bar, and then I went off to get something to eat at one of the local restaurants, and then I went back to the hotel, and then I'd had quite a lot to drink during the course of the afternoon and the evening, and so I was probably fairly sort of blitzed by that stage, and I had a little bop along to my MP3 player in my room, and that was great. And then I sat outside and enjoyed the warmth of the evening and basically the beautiful smells coming up from the forest, and wished I didn't have to go home. So it was a lovely, relaxing last day. Worried a bit about how I was going to get to where I needed to be the following morning, but apart from that, it was very relaxing. I enjoyed it a lot.
And just to conclude, then, how did you get back? How was the transportation?
Okay, well, I'd been invited by the three Corsican people who I'd met earlier on the route had invited me to stay at their apartment in Bastia, and so therefore what I decided to do was to get a bus to Bastia and then spend the night in Bastia and then travel by train from Bastia back over to Calvi the following day. And so I left the hotel at about 8 o'clock in the morning and walked down to the Gite, which was a sort of pleasant 10-minute stroll, and got on the Gite. I think it was €4 from the Gite to the local village, Sant Lucy de Porto Vecchio, I think is where it was. And then I got onto a bus there with the Italian bloke and a couple of other people, and had a journey of about an hour and a half, perhaps it was, to Bastia, and then spent the evening in Bastia with the friends that I'd made earlier on. And then the following day, I got on a train from Bastia and went over to Calvi, and later in the day I flew home. And that was that.
Well, nice and simple. I mean, would you advise people to allow a day at each end just to ensure there's no panic in getting to wherever you want to start and finish from?
I think that certainly it's a big advantage to have a spare day at the end if you can. This was a piece of good advice that I read in Paddy's book, but I didn't take, and I kind of really regretted it. Travelling home worked out fine for me in the end, but there was a bit of luck involved in that, really, because Paddy suggests, and I'm sure it's a good idea, that people who are going out there should make an attempt before you go to get an idea of how the public transport works at the end of the route. Because, of course, with it being a linear route, unless you're planning to fly back from a different part of the island, then you need to get back to Calvi, assuming that Calvi is where you went to in the first place. And it is important to know about the public transport. And as I say, I hadn't kind of done that, and it did work out, but it might have been different. It mightn't have worked. It mightn't have fallen into place. And I think that if you do have an extra day, then well, it might be essential, and at the very least it would be convenient to have that extra day. But I think the thing to do is to do the research before you leave England, really, or where it is you're going from. Do the research initially to find out where the trains go and how often they go and what times, and the same with the buses, so that you're not spending the last few days in a state of some anxiety about how you're going to get home.
There's nothing worse when you sort of see the end in sight, is there? Well,
Absolutely.
Shirley, thank you very much for all that detailed information. It's really padded out some of the books and notes that I've seen and read, and I'm sure many of the listeners will have enjoyed the practical and realistic information you've added in there, which has been really useful.
Not at all.
You're obviously intended to go back and do it again, which I find quite interesting, and that in itself says a lot about the actual trip itself. Would you, I mean, you're a solo walker, and you do a lot of solo walks, but you've also walked sort of in groups and socially as well. Would you say that it was a walk best undertaken on your own, or with somebody or a group of people to share it with?
I'd say it's probably best to go with a group of people, really, because I enjoy walking on my own, but I also enjoy spending time with other people. And I think that this is a walk that would perhaps be lots of fun done on a slightly more sociable basis, basically, so that you could have a bit of a laugh and a giggle together at the refuges in the evening, and so that's my feeling. But some people just prefer always to walk on their own, in which case that would be fine for them. But if I were going back, then I'd like to do it with a group of people.
Well, finally then, as we do with these things, let's just have a quick 5 minutes chatting about gear, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
As you say, you took your, it was a laser competition, I believe, wasn't it?
It was.
And yeah. So just a quick run through then. Was it the standard sort of hiking gear, or had you sort of, apart from the cooking gear, left anything out of your rucksack?
I left a few other things behind. I didn't bother with the GPS because I didn't think I would need it, and indeed I didn't need it. I've mentioned already that I didn't take maps. I didn't bother with waterproof trousers either. I didn't think that I would need them, and I didn't need them. I'd normally have, in addition to a base layer, of course, I'd normally have a mid layer and some kind of warm jacket and then a waterproof top. But I didn't bother taking a warm jacket either. And again, I didn't need that. What I did take essentially was, from day to day walking, I took a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. I actually took 2 t-shirts, but next time I wouldn't bother taking 2 because it's so easy to just rinse things through and dry them out on a rock overnight that I wouldn't bother with 2 walking t-shirts. I had a very lightweight fleece that I've had for years. One of those sort of smocky fleeces that's just got a little zip at the top. I took that, and I didn't need it during the day, but I used it in the evenings in the refuges because with it being mountainous, I found that when the sun goes down in the evening, it goes very suddenly and it can get very chilly. So whilst it was never freezing cold, I mean, it did get quite cold, and the little fleece was very helpful. So I didn't bother with a warm jacket. I didn't have my cooking kit either, of course. I normally take a sort of Paramo Fuera windproof smock when I'm walking in this country, and in fact when I've been walking the Pyrenees. But again, I didn't bother, and I didn't need that either. I didn't take my bed socks or thick gloves or a map case. So I actually left out quite a lot of the things that I would normally take along with me. And with the exception of the cooking gear, I found that, those have been good decisions, and I didn't need any of those things.
I'm surprised that you didn't have a down jacket then for the evening, so I would have thought it would have gone in very, very chilly at night.
Well, no, I mean, it wasn't really. I mean, it was chilly, but it wasn't... It wasn't chilly enough for me to need a down jacket. And I mean, having said that, I mean, I tend to I tend to run cool rather than warm, and so I think that if I'd needed if there'd been a need for one, I'm sure I would have detected it. But no, I was perfectly happy with my little fleece. I mean, having said that, most of the evenings I actually spent having something to eat in the refuge and then, perhaps sitting around for a little while and chatting with people before going back to the tent. But once I got into the tent, it was lovely and warm. I suppose that the ground, of course, had absorbed a lot of heat during the course of the day, and I suppose that radiated up, and I really wasn't cold.
Okay, so sleeping bag, sleeping mat?
Yes, I took a lightweight sleeping bag. Just let me see. I had a PhD Minimus, which is 520 grams. I've had it for several years now. It's very lightweight. It was absolutely perfect. Some nights it was so warm that I just basically pushed it down and lay on top. But on those occasions when it was chilly, it was warm enough almost all of the time. I've got into the habit of I carry a very light bivy bag with me all the time now. It's an Equinox Mummy, and it's only 188 grams. So I had that. It's partly so that if I'm having a drink in the tent, I don't have to worry if I accidentally spill it on the sleeping bag because, it'll just run off the bivy. I think there might have been 1 or possibly 2 evenings or 2 nights when I was just a little bit cold, perhaps when I was camping a little bit higher up. And on those nights, I'd put that lightweight sleeping bag in the bivy, and then I was toasty warm. For a mattress, I actually took one of the short versions of the X-Bed down mat. It might sound a bit of an odd choice to take what people perhaps think of as a fairly sort of, robust camping mattress to Corsica, and I've got a couple of inshore mats, and I had been intending to take those. Those are lighter, and they're inflatable mattresses, thicker than Thermarests, because I've never been able to sleep comfortably on a thin mattress. But I found that both of my inshore mats had developed a multitude of very tiny holes, and I spent several occasions kind of bucking around in the bath with the blasted things, trying to identify the holes and then patching them, and I just didn't manage to find them all and fix them all. So In the end, I bought and took this small X bed, and it was absolutely fantastic because I hadn't anticipated, you see, how hard the ground was going to be. It just hadn't occurred to me that it was going to be baked clay, but it was baked clay. It was very hard, and so the mattress was perfect. And although it's a fairly robust mattress, it's still less than 600 grams. And so I was delighted with that. And because I always have, those very tiny little Thermarest squares, the tiny little inflatable squares that you can use to sit on if you stop for a drink. I always take one of those. I mean, I think that other people make them, but mine happens to be a Thermarest. And I put my feet on that, so that my feet didn't get cold, even though the mattress was only short. And yeah, that was my sleeping kit.
Brilliant. So no big sort of wardrobe of clothes then? No big great changes of clothes? Just one set of dry and one set of clean? Something like that?
Yes. Well, I had one pair of shorts and 2 T-shirts for walking during the day. And as I say, next time I wouldn't bother with 2 T-shirts. I'd just take one. For the evening, I took a T-shirt, a very lightweight old silk T-shirt that I bought from Marks and Sparks thousands of years ago. I took that because it's very light and squishable. And I also took my zip-off terror pants, that's the ones, yes. I took some of those as well. I think they're the old-fashioned ones, but I've had them for yonks and I really like them. So I took those for the evenings. And I suppose because they are the zip-offs, I was probably thinking that if I needed to swap shorts during the day, I could do that, but I didn't need to in the end. And they were perfect. So for the evening, I had the terror pants, this sort of very lightweight T-shirt and the very lightweight fleece. And I've got a very ancient Helly T-shirt that I've had for 20 years that I always take to sleep in. At home I would have some kind of fleecy bottoms as well, but I didn't bother. I just took the T-shirt and it was fine. That was that. I took 4 pairs of socks, the short kind of ankle socks. Smart Wool Adrenaline Light Mini Crew is what I took. And I could have managed with 3, and I probably could have managed with 2. But my idea was that one of the pairs I'd be able to use for the evening, so I took 4 pairs of those. I was on my feet. I was wearing the rock lights that I've been using for walking in for several years, and they were absolutely fine. I mean, the only thing, they were fine in terms of being grippy, in terms of being light, in terms of providing enough support. In all of those respects, as they always have been before, they were absolutely perfect. Unfortunately, I better mention, because it does tend to keep happening, it seems, the soles started peeling away on each of the shoes, and I thought that this was a problem that they'd sorted out, but apparently not, because it was a brand new pair of shoes that I bought for the trip, and it worried me a bit that, I mean, as you'll appreciate, if the sole's coming off when you're on kind of rocky mountains, then, you get a bit afraid that you're going to trip, but I didn't trip, and in terms of comfort and support, they were perfect. And I also took, those things, Crocs, those very lightweight...
lightweight, yeah.
Yeah, so I took a pair of Crocs for the evenings, and they were absolutely brilliant. I found that I wore them on the flight, I wore them in Nice, I wore them in the evenings, I wore them in the showers. On the couple of occasions that I went for a swim in a rocky pool, I had them on there as well. And they were just great, and they weigh virtually nothing, and they're a little bit bulky, but they don't take up loads of space. I think I might actually have clipped them onto the back of my rucksack, or perhaps I stuffed them into the back pocket, I'm not sure. But they were perfect, so I took those as well. And some knickers and a couple of running bras, and I think that was it in terms of... as I was going to say, I did take a very lightweight pair of gloves. I took my Tilly hat, which was perfect. I mean, happily, well, there was only one sort of rainy day. The rest of the time it was sunny and the Tilly was lovely. The thin pair of gloves I needed on the one kind of windy morning. And what I forgot to mention is although I didn't take waterproof trousers, I did take, the Berghaus Pack Light smock. I took that. It squashes up to virtually nothing. And I wore it, I think, twice, and it was absolutely perfect.
Right. Okay. So, just to quickly conclude, then, what would you leave behind next time, if there was anything at all, and what, apart from the cooking gear, should you have taken? Apart from the cooking gear, I don't think there was anything else that I should have taken. I think
it all worked out. And there's, oh, sorry, that's not quite right. I'll tell you what I should have taken that I didn't take. Spare batteries. I hope that nobody else will make the same stupid mistake that I made here. I forgot on this occasion to take spare batteries, and that turned into a really big problem because it's very difficult to get them on the GR20. The only place that I could actually get them was at Visavona, which of course is halfway through the walk. And I'd realized my mistake, during the sort of northern part. And I'd wanted to take, those convenient little films that you can take with a lot of the little digital cameras these days. And I had to stop doing that because, of course, I was sort of going through my batteries at a great rate of knots. So, yes, sorry, that's what I should have taken. I should have taken plenty of spare batteries of decent quality. So I hope nobody else makes the same daft mistake. And the other thing, actually, I realized with the benefit of hindsight that I should have taken is I'd heard that that there's hardly any mobile phone reception there, and so therefore I didn't bother with a charger, and I almost didn't bother taking my mobile, but I did take it in the end. And then I found that although there isn't reception all over the place, there is reception in a couple of places. Hortasco, for instance, and some other places. And I soon realized that as soon as there was reception, of course, I wanted to check my texts, and I wanted to send some texts, and then I wanted to add some money on, and the battery ran down quickly. So I should have taken a spare mobile battery too. This is something I've done in other places. They're very inexpensive on eBay, and you just charge a couple up and stick them in your pocket, and there you go. So I should have done that as well.
Well, certainly I remember being a recipient of one of your messages and being green with envy that you were sitting somewhere fantastic and having a cold beer, having just done some particular peak. It sounded fantastic.
I think it was probably that very place, actually, Hortasco. I think that's exactly where it was.
Just a very quick aside, and something that obviously is important to a lot of people these days, is that from an environmental point of view, what are your suggestions, or what do people do regarding the toilet facilities? Did you take a toilet trowel, or do you use it just at the huts, or what? I don't think I did take the toilet trowel because I knew that I was going to be able to use the huts. Basically, facilities exist at the huts. Even if you're not staying in the refuges, even if you're just camping outside, that you're able to go and use the shower. I think they've all got showers, and none of the showers are hot. It's just sort of cold water that's, I suppose, accumulated from rainfall or something, and so they're absolutely freezing cold, albeit very refreshing once you actually get out and rub yourself down a bit. And toilets as well. There's sort of toilets outside, or sometimes there are little blocks, and so I just use those, and anybody can use them, whether you're staying at the refuges or not. So that's what I did, and it wasn't a problem. Excellent. Great. Well, Shirley, thank you very much indeed for taking the time. This has been a fascinating content, and I'm sure many people have appreciated it. I've certainly had emails from people desperately waiting to hear this conversation. So,
well, not at all. It's my pleasure, and I hope that there's something useful in there, and that I hope it might encourage somebody else to go out and have an equally brilliant time. It
certainly sounds definitely one on our list to achieve, and I'd love to give it a go. And you certainly sold it to me. Definitely big time. I suppose the next time I'm going to catch up with you actually will be in Scotland on the TGO Challenge. Hopefully,
extremely exciting.
Yeah, somewhere remote. So until we actually meet again and catch up with you and get some more interesting stories and adventures that's happened to Shirley, thank you very much for your time, and have some safe travels.
Thank you very much, and you too, Bob. Take care.
And that concludes part 2 of this podcast series about the GR20. My thanks to Shirley for taking the time to share it all with us so eloquently. For more information about Shirley's GR20 trip and others she has made, do visit her website for photos, detailed information, and a lot of outdoor inspiration. Her website is www.pwiglet.com, and you spell that PEEWIGLET.com. So until next time, folks, safe travels, high peaks, happy hiking, and bye for now.
This independent programme is produced and hosted by theoutdoorstation.co.uk.